The massive viewscreen showed only destruction. Commander Do-hyun rubbed his tired eyes as he watched the Alliance flagship break into pieces. The Vornak ships continued to fire even as escape pods launched from the dying vessel. There was no mercy in this war. "Commander, the Council is requesting your presence," said a young aide at his side. Do-hyun nodded and turned away from the screen. The command center of Space Station K-12 buzzed with activity, but he could feel the mood. It was not determination or courage that drove the Alliance officers now. It was fear. For 3 years, the Galactic Alliance had fought the Vornax Empire. For 3 years, they had lost ground, ships, and lives. Now they were backed into their last corner. System K-12 was the final defensive line before the core worlds. If it fell, billions would die. Do-hyun walked quickly through the curved hallways of the station. His human legs were shorter than those of many alien species in the Alliance, but he moved with purpose. As Earth's highest-ranking military officer in the Alliance, he carried the weight of his entire planet's future. The council chamber fell silent as he entered. 7 alien representatives sat around a circular table. Their faces were different. Some had scales. Others had multiple eyes or no eyes at all. But their expressions shared the same grim outlook. Admiral Kyung-soon, the only other human in the room, gave Do-hyun a small nod. She was the last surviving high command officer after today's battle. "Commander Do-hyun," began Counselor Vex, a tall blue-skinned alien. "We have called this emergency meeting to discuss surrender terms." "Surrender?" Do-hyun kept his voice level, though anger flared inside him. "The battle for K-12 has barely begun." "Be realistic, Commander," said another counselor, this one with 4 arms folded across its chest. "The Vornax outnumber us 5-1. After today's losses, that ratio is closer to 8-1. Our most advanced ships cannot match their firepower. It is time to save the lives we can." Do-hyun looked around the table. No one would meet his eyes except Admiral Kyung-soon. "The Vornax do not take prisoners," Do-hyun reminded them. "Their idea of mercy is quick death. Those who surrender are worked to death in mining colonies." "We are aware," said Vex. "But we must think of our civilians." Do-hyun took a deep breath. "I have a proposal. A way to turn this war around." The council members exchanged doubtful looks. "We've heard many proposals, Commander," said the 4-armed counselor. "None have stopped the Vornax advance." "Because none have used humanity's greatest weapon," said Do-hyun. "Our experience with war." He tapped his wrist device and a hologram appeared above the table. It showed a large military transport ship in orbit around Earth. "This is the UES Incheon. On board are 5,000 soldiers of the 77th Human Expeditionary Force, veterans of Earth's resource wars. They've been in cryosleep because the Alliance deemed them too aggressive for regular service." "Savages," muttered one counselor, though not quietly enough. Admiral Kyung-soon stood up. "The 77th were among Earth's finest soldiers. They were placed in reserve because their methods did not align with Alliance military doctrine. But Alliance doctrine has failed us." Do-hyun nodded his thanks to her and continued. "The Vornax fight with honor and follow predictable patterns. Humans adapted to warfare differently. We learned to be unpredictable, to use terrain, psychology, and deception." "You speak of dishonorable combat," said Vex with distaste. "I speak of survival," corrected Do-hyun. "The 77th can deploy to K-12 within 30 hours. They can train our remaining forces in human tactics." "And why would these human tactics succeed where our strategies have failed?" asked a counselor with crystalline skin. "Because the Vornax have never fought humans in large numbers," said Admiral Kyung-soon. "They don't understand how we think." The council chamber erupted in argument. Do-hyun waited patiently. He knew what they were thinking. Humans were one of the newest species in the Alliance. They were physically weaker than many other races. Their technology was less advanced, but they had joined the Alliance shortly after ending centuries of warfare on their own planet. They understood combat in ways the peaceful Alliance species did not. Finally, Vex raised a hand for silence. "We will vote. The alternative is surrender, which we all know means death or slavery." One by one, the counselors voted. It was close, but in the end, they approved Do-hyun's plan. "Send the signal to wake the 77th, Vex said. "Their transport should head directly to K-12. And Commander Do-hyun, if this fails..." "It won't," said Do-hyun with confidence he didn't entirely feel. Lieutenant Jiho opened his eyes to the cold light of the cryo bay. His muscles ached as feeling returned to his body. The familiar weight of his cybernetic right arm registered in his brain once more. "Wake up, Lieutenant." A medical officer stood over him. "Your unit has been activated." Jiho sat up slowly, his head pounding. Around him, other pods were opening, men and women of the 77th, all with the same confused expressions. "How long?" Jiho asked, his voice rough from disuse. 2 years, 4 months, the officer replied. "The war with the Vornax is going badly. You're being deployed to System K-12. Jiho nodded and swung his legs over the side of the pod. His cybernetic arm whirred as he flexed the fingers. A reminder of Earth's last war when a plasma blast had taken his natural arm. "Sergeant Taewan?" he called out. "Here, sir." A stocky man with a scar across his cheek raised his hand from another pod. "Ha-Yun, present." A woman with short black hair and alert eyes was already standing, stretching her limbs. One by one, Jiho's squad leaders reported in. They were all veterans, all survivors, all human. They gathered in the transport ship's briefing room. Commander Do Hyun's face appeared on the main screen. 77th, welcome back to active duty. Do Hyun looked tired but determined. "I'll be direct. The Alliance is losing this war. System K-12 is our last major defensive position. If it falls, the Vornax will have a clear path to Earth and all Alliance homeworlds." Murmurs spread through the room. Jiho raised a hand for silence. "The Alliance has been fighting a conventional war," continued Do Hyun. "Honorable combat. Ship-to-ship engagements. It hasn't worked. The Vornax are stronger and have better technology." "Then why wake us?" asked Taewan. "Our weapons won't be any better." "Because you know how to fight differently," said Do Hyun. "The Alliance needs soldiers who understand that winning sometimes means breaking the rules." Jiho felt the mood in the room change. The 77th had been put into cryosleep because the Alliance had called their tactics excessive and barbaric. Now, those same tactics might save the galaxy. "We arrive at K-12 in 26 hours, said Do Hyun. "Be ready to deploy immediately. The Vornax are already breaching the outer defenses." The screen went dark. Jiho stood and faced his soldiers. "You heard the commander. Check your gear. Review the Vornax tactical files. We may have been asleep, but nothing has changed. We fight to win." As his people filed out, Admiral Kyung-soon entered the room. Jiho snapped to attention. "Admiral." "At ease, Lieutenant." She studied him with tired eyes. "I wanted to see the 77th for myself. Many in the Alliance fear you as much as they fear the Vornax." "We're soldiers, not monsters," said Jiho. "I know. I recommended waking your unit months ago." She sighed. "The Council refused until now. They don't understand that sometimes survival requires difficult choices." Jiho nodded. His cybernetic arm hummed softly as he clenched his fist. "We'll hold K-12, he promised." "I hope so." Admiral Kyung-soon turned to leave, then paused. "The Alliance species have lived in peace for generations. They see war as a series of honorable exchanges. They don't understand what humans know." "And what's that, Admiral?" asked Jiho. "That war is hell," she said simply. "And in hell the only rule is survival." After she left, Jiho stared out the viewport at the stars streaking by. Somewhere ahead was System K-12. Somewhere ahead an enemy that thought victory was assured. They were about to learn what it meant to face human soldiers. The UES Incheon dropped out of faster-than-light travel with a flash of light. System K-12 spread before them, a battlefield of broken ships and burning stations. Through the viewport, Jiho could see Vornax warships pressing toward the inner planets. Alliance defenses were crumbling. "Receiving transmission from K-12 Command," said Ha-Un from her communication station. "They're sending landing coordinates." The outer defense ring just collapsed. Jiho nodded. "Tell the squad leaders to prepare for immediate deployment. This isn't a drill. We hit the ground fighting." The transport ship cut through space, dodging debris from destroyed vessels. Jiho felt the familiar calm before battle settle over him. His cybernetic arm ran through its diagnostic sequence automatically. All systems ready. The ship shuddered as it entered K-12's atmosphere. The main planet of the system was a rocky world, its surface dotted with Alliance military bases. Most were under attack. "Touching down in 30 seconds, announced the pilot. "Good luck down there." The landing ramp lowered with a hiss of hydraulics. Jiho led his troops out into chaos. Alliance soldiers ran in all directions. Explosions rocked the ground. In the distance, massive Vornax walkers stomped toward the base, their weapons cutting through buildings like paper. 77th, form up. Jiho shouted over the noise.
Defensive positions.
A harried Alliance officer approached, his uniform torn and dirty. You're the human reinforcements? We expected more. We're enough, said Jiho. Where's your command center? The officer pointed to a bunker dug into a hillside. General Zax is coordinating our retreat. Retreat? Jiho shook his head. Not anymore. Take us to him. Inside the bunker, alien officers huddled around holographic displays of the battlefield. Jiho recognized the species. Talari, Nujax, Vreen. All Alliance members with long histories of peace before the Vornax arrived. General Zax, a tall, gray-skinned alien, looked up as they entered. The human unit? You're too late. We're evacuating this position. No, you're not, said Jiho. His squad leaders spread out behind him, Taiwan and Ha-Yun flanking him like shadows. You're going to show us your battle plans and then we're going to fix them. The alien general drew himself up. I've commanded armies for 50 cycles. The Vornax have broken through our lines. They outnumber us 10 to 1. Retreat is our only option. Retreat is death, said Jiho flatly. He stepped forward and placed his cybernetic hand on the hologram, changing the display to show the approaching Vornax forces. You've been fighting a gentleman's war, lining up your forces, engaging in set-piece battles. That's why you're losing. It is the honorable way to fight, insisted Zax. War isn't about honor. It's about winning. Jiho turned to his people. And what do you see in their communications? The communications specialist studied the data scrolling across a nearby screen. Predictable patterns, fixed frequencies, no encryption worthy of the name. Taiwan, their fortifications? The demolitions expert snorted. Straight lines. No killing zones, no traps. It's like they want to die. Jiho faced General Zax again. We don't fight fair. We fight to win. And if you want to save this planet, you'll listen to what we have to say. The alien officers muttered among themselves, but General Zax raised a hand for silence. Commander Do-hyun vouched for your some methods. What do you propose? Jiho smiled, though there was no warmth in it. First, we make the Vornax think they've won. From his command ship, Vornax war leader Drux watched the Alliance forces fall back from their defensive line. His mandibles clicked in satisfaction. They run, he said to his sub-commanders. The outer base is abandoned. Advance and claim it. War leader, said one of his officers, our scouts report that the humans have arrived. Drux's compound eyes shifted. Humans, they are of no concern. Small, weak creatures. How many? A single transport. Perhaps 1,000 soldiers. Laughter rippled through the command deck. The Vornax stood over 8 feet tall, their bodies protected by natural armor. 1,000 humans would make no difference. Proceed as planned, ordered Drux. The Alliance throws its scraps at us in desperation. His walkers advanced on the abandoned Alliance base. Sensors showed no life signs, no powered systems. The cowards had fled without even disabling their equipment. War leader, we have secured the base, reported a ground commander. They left supplies, weapons, even functional vehicles. Pitiful, said Drux. Begin processing the captured materials. On his view screen, he watched his troops enter buildings, gather abandoned equipment, and power up the base's systems. The explosions started seconds later. One by one, the buildings erupted in flames. Buried mines detonated under his walkers. Ammunition dumps exploded. Fuel tanks became fireballs. And from the surrounding hills, weapons fire rained down on his confused troops. What is happening? Drux demanded. Ambush, shouted an officer. The base was rigged to explode. Impossible. Our sensors detected no explosives, no troops in hiding. But the evidence was clear on the screens. His forces were in chaos, taking heavy casualties from enemies they couldn't see. Pull back, ordered Drux. Regroup at Point Beta. As his surviving forces retreated, Drux's anger grew. This was not how war was fought. This was trickery, deception, dishonor. This was human warfare. In the Alliance Command Center, Jiho watched the Vornax retreat on the tactical display. Around him, alien officers stared in amazement. The explosives were hidden in lead containers, explained Taiwan to a curious Talari. Their sensors can't penetrate lead, and we coated our thermal signatures with special blankets while hiding in the hills. This is not how we fight wars, said General Zax. No, it's how you lose them, said Jiho. The Vornax are used to enemies who follow rules. We break them. Do-hyun entered the command center, Admiral Kyung-soon at his side. Well done, Lieutenant. You've given us our first victory in months. A small one, said Jiho. They'll be more cautious now. Which buys us time. Do-hyun turned to the holographic display. The Alliance Council is concerned about your methods, but they cannot argue with the results. What were these methods exactly? Asked an Alliance Council member who had joined them via hologram. His tone carried disapproval. Asymmetric warfare, said Admiral Kyung-soon. Guerrilla tactics. Psychological operations. Standard human approaches when facing a superior force. There was no honor in that victory, insisted the council member. There's no honor in extinction either, replied Kyung-soon sharply. On Earth, we learned long ago that survival sometimes means abandoning rigid codes. Jiho stepped forward. The Vornax believe they are superior. That belief makes them predictable. We need to shatter their confidence. How? Asked General Zax. By continuing to do what they don't expect. Jiho nodded to Ha-un, who stepped up to the tactical display. The Vornax communicate on these frequencies, she said, highlighting data streams. They don't encrypt most tactical communications because no one has ever intercepted them before. We can use this. False orders? Asked Do-hyun, understanding immediately. Jiho nodded. Confusion in their ranks. Make units fire on each other. Send them into traps. The council member's hologram flickered as he shook his head. This goes against everything the Alliance stands for. With respect, said Jiho. What the Alliance stands for will be forgotten if we lose this war. The Vornax don't take prisoners. They don't accept surrender. They exterminate. Silence fell over the command center. The truth of his words was undeniable. Finally, Do-hyun spoke. Continue implementing your strategies, Lieutenant. The Council has authorized me to give you operational freedom. As the meeting broke up, Taewon approached Jiho. The aliens don't like us much. They don't have to like us, said Jiho. They just have to follow our lead if they want to live. Ha-un joined them, her face serious. The Vornax are regrouping. They're calling in reinforcements. This was just the first skirmish. Jiho nodded. Then we need to prepare the next surprise. Gather the squad leaders. We're going to teach these aliens how humans fight when their backs are against the wall. Outside the command bunker, explosions still lit the night sky as delayed charges continued to detonate across the abandoned base. In the distance, Vornax ships descended from orbit, bringing fresh troops and equipment. The real battle was just beginning. 1 week after the first human victory, the war had changed. The Vornax no longer advanced with confidence. They probed carefully, checked for traps, and moved in tight formations. But they still came, and they still outnumbered the Alliance forces by a wide margin. Jiho stood in the war room studying the holographic map. Red markers showing Vornax positions surrounded the Blue Alliance territory like a closing fist. Their reinforcements have arrived, said Do-hyun, pointing to new enemy formations, another 3 carrier groups. Our defensive strategies have slowed them, but they're adapting. That's the problem with intelligent enemies, said Jiho. They learn. Admiral Kyung-soon joined them at the map. The Council is pleased with our progress but concerned about our losses. We can't sustain a defensive war indefinitely. Jiho nodded. He had been thinking the same thing. We need to take the fight to them. Attack? Do-hyun looked surprised. We're outnumbered 10-1. Numbers aren't everything, said Jiho. We've been playing defense because that's what the Alliance always does. The Vornax expect us to stay in our bunkers and wait for the end. Ha-un entered the room carrying a data tablet. Lieutenant, I've finished analyzing their communication patterns. There's something strange about their battle coordination. Show me, said Jiho. She brought up a display showing signal patterns from Vornax ships. There's an ultra-low frequency transmission coming from their command carrier. It's not just communications. It's something else. Could it be a weapon? Asked Admiral Kyung-soon. Maybe. Ha-un frowned at the data. Whatever it is, it pulses stronger just before they launch major attacks. Jiho considered this information. We need to know what that signal does. And for that, we need to get inside their command carrier. The room fell silent. What Jiho was suggesting seemed impossible. No Alliance ship could get close enough, said Do-hyun finally. Their defenses are too strong. Then we don't use an Alliance ship, said Jiho. During Earth's shadow conflicts, Special Forces developed stealth insertion pods. Small, nearly undetectable by sensors, designed to attach to enemy vessels like parasites. We have similar technology, said Admiral Kyung-soon, but it was deemed too dangerous for regular use. The survival rate of such missions was low, Jiho smiled grimly. That's why they called us. Captain Sunmi checked her oxygen levels one more time. The insertion pod around her was barely large enough for her and the 5 members of her team. Their breath fogged in the cold air as life support was kept at minimal levels to avoid detection. 2 minutes to launch, said the technician over the comm. Final systems check. Sunmi had volunteered for this mission immediately. Before the cryo-sleep, she had been one of Earth's top Special Forces operatives, specialized in zero-gravity infiltration. Her team was the best the 77th had to offer. Remember, she told her team, once we're attached to the Vornax carrier, we have 6 hours to find the source of the signal, place the charges, and return to the pod. If we're not back by then, the pod returns without us. Her soldiers nodded. They understood the risks. This was a potential suicide mission, but if successful, it could change the course of the war. Launch in 3, 2, 1. The pod ejected from the Alliance stealth ship with a soft hiss. Thrusters fired briefly, then went silent. Now they were on a ballistic trajectory toward the massive Vornax command carrier, visible in the distance as a dark shape against the stars. No reaction from the carrier, reported Junho, her sensor specialist. They don't see us. Sunmi checked her rifle. The special ammunition was designed to penetrate Vornax armor without making noise. Every detail of this mission demanded silence and stealth. The pod drifted closer to the carrier, adjusting course with tiny, almost imperceptible thruster burns. The Vornax ship grew larger in their viewports, an enormous vessel bristling with weapons. Impact in 30 seconds, whispered Junho. Brace. The pod struck the hull of the carrier with a muffled thud, magnetic clamps activating to secure it in place. Cutting lasers immediately began slicing through the outer hull. 15 seconds to breach, said Sunmi. Helmet sealed. Weapons ready. The laser completed its circle and the section of hull fell inward. They were inside. Sunmi led the way, her magnetic boots keeping her anchored to the floor in the zero-gravity section of the ship. The corridor was empty, dimly lit by red emergency lighting. According to intelligence, the signal source should be 3 decks up, in the center of the ship, said Junho, checking his scanner. We need to find an access shaft. They moved silently through the carrier, avoiding patrol routes that Alliance intelligence had mapped based on intercepted communications. The Vornax were large, intimidating creatures. Up close, their chitinous armor gleamed dully in the low light, and their multiple limbs moved with surprising grace in the zero-G environment. Sunmi held up a fist, signaling her team to stop as a Vornax patrol passed a junction ahead. Once clear, they continued toward the center of the vessel. I'm picking up strong energy readings, whispered Junho as they reached a sealed door. The signal source is just beyond this point. Sunmi nodded to their tech specialist, who placed a device on the door's control panel. Seconds later, the door slid open. The chamber beyond was vast, dominated by a pulsing blue sphere suspended in a magnetic field. Around it, Vornax technicians monitored control stations. That's it, said Junho in awe. The signal source. Sunmi studied the scene, planning their approach. Plant charges at these points, she indicated key structural supports. We move on my signal. The team separated, using the shadows and equipment as cover. Sunmi crept closer to the sphere, curious about its purpose. As she neared it, she felt a wave of something. Not quite fear, but a sense of unease that made her want to turn and run. Realization dawned. It's a fear weapon, she subvocalized into her comm. The sphere generates fear. That's how they've been winning. They broadcast terror to Alliance troops before attacking. Why aren't we affected? Asked Junho. Different brain chemistry, maybe, replied Sunmi. Or our helmets are shielding us. Either way, this changes everything. She was so focused on the sphere that she didn't notice the Vornax guard until it was too late. A chittering cry of alarm went up, and suddenly the chamber was in chaos. Cover blown. Complete the mission, Sunmi shouted, raising her rifle and firing at the nearest guards. The special ammunition punched through their armor, dropping 2 Vornax before the others could react. Her team fought desperately, placing charges even as they defended themselves. Alarms blared throughout the carrier. Charges set, called one of her soldiers. 90 seconds to detonation. Fall back to the pod, ordered Sunmi. She provided covering fire as her team retreated. A massive Vornax officer charged her, its mandibles clicking in rage. Sunmi fired, but her weapon jammed. The creature was on her before she could draw her sidearm, its powerful limbs crushing her against a control panel. Through pain, she saw her team at the chamber entrance. "Go," she gasped. "Complete the mission." Junho hesitated, then nodded grimly. He knew what mattered most. He led the remaining team members out as Sunmi fought the Vornax officer with her combat knife. As they ran, the carrier shuddered around them. The Vornax were moving to battle stations, preparing to repel what they thought was a major attack. They didn't realize the real threat was already inside. The team reached the pod just as the charges detonated. The explosion rocked the entire carrier, sending tremors through the hull. "What about the captain?" asked one soldier as they sealed the pod. Junho's face was hard. "She gave us our chance. Now we make it count." The pod detached from the carrier, thrusters firing at full power now that stealth was no longer necessary. Behind them, secondary explosions bloomed inside the Vornax vessel as the Fear Sphere's containment field collapsed. In the Alliance Command Center, the news of the mission's outcome brought mixed emotions. The fear weapon had been destroyed, but at the cost of Sunmi's life. Jiho stood silent as Junho delivered his report. "The sphere generated fear pheromones, amplified 1,000 times," explained Junho. "That's why Alliance troops often froze in battle. They were being bombarded with artificial terror. And we weren't affected because," began Do-hyun. "Human brain chemistry processes fear differently," said Admiral Kyung-soon. "We evolved on a world where fear was a daily companion. We learned to function despite it." Jiho stared at the tactical display, where the damaged Vornax command carrier was pulling back from the front line. Captain Sunmi knew the risks. She made her choice. "Her sacrifice has given us an opportunity," said Do-hyun. "Without their fear weapon, the Vornax have lost their greatest advantage. And now they know fear themselves," added Hyun. She had been monitoring Vornax communications. "Their transmissions are chaotic. They can't believe a small team penetrated their defenses." Jiho nodded slowly. "Then we pressed the advantage immediately." "How?" asked General Zax, who had come to respect the human tactics, if not entirely approve of them. "Propaganda," said Jiho. "Hyun, broadcast footage from the mission. Show the galaxy that the mighty Vornax can bleed. Show them running in panic as their ship burns." "Psychological warfare," said Admiral Kyung-soon with approval. "The most effective kind," agreed Jiho. "While they're off balance, we prepare for the next phase." The destruction of the Vornax fear weapon changed the war. Alliance soldiers no longer froze in terror when the enemy approached. Defensive lines held firm. For the first time in years, the Vornax advance stalled. But war leader Drux was not defeated. His massive flagship moved to the front line, a sign of his determination. The Vornax still outnumbered Alliance forces, and their technology remained superior. "They're probing for weaknesses," said Jiho, studying the tactical display in the war room. 2 weeks had passed since Sunmi's sacrifice. "Testing our lines, looking for gaps. They've changed their tactics," noted Do-hyun. "No more frontal assaults. They're being cautious now." "That buys us time, but not victory," said Admiral Kyung-soon. "We need to understand what drives them. Why do they fight?" Jiho nodded. Intelligence on Vornax motivation was sparse. The Alliance had been fighting them for years without understanding their true goals. "We need to capture one of their officers," said Jiho. "Someone who knows their strategy." Tae-wan laughed bitterly. "The Vornax don't surrender ever, they fight to the death." "Then we don't give them the choice," said Jiho. He outlined a daring plan. A small team would target a Vornax command shuttle, disable it without destroying it, and extract an officer for questioning. It was dangerous but necessary. 3 days later, Jiho led the mission himself. They set a trap, using a false distress signal from what appeared to be an Alliance scout ship. When the Vornax shuttle came to investigate, they struck with precision. The shuttle crashed on an uninhabited moon. Jiho's team surrounded it before the Vornax could organize a defense. In the battle that followed, most of the Vornax fought to the death as expected. But one officer, injured and trapped, was taken alive. They returned to base with their prisoner, a sub-commander according to its insignia. The Vornax stood over 8 feet tall, even hunched in pain from its wounds. Its compound eyes reflected the lights of the holding cell. "It refuses to speak," reported the Alliance interrogator. "Not surprising. The Vornax view capture as the ultimate dishonor." Jiho studied the alien prisoner. "Let me try a different approach." He entered the cell alone. The Vornax's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement or contempt. "Small human," it said in broken alliance standard. "You think you can make me betray my kind?" "I think you're intelligent enough to see the bigger picture," replied Jiho. "I'm Lieutenant Jiho of Earth. What do they call you?" The Vornax stared silently. "Very well. I'll call you prisoner for now." Jiho sat down across from the alien. "You're wondering why you're still alive. Why we didn't kill you like your companions. Humans are weak, afraid to kill." Jiho smiled coldly. "We've killed thousands of your kind. We're not afraid of death, ours or yours. But we want to understand." "Understand what?" "Why this war?" The Vornax appeared at the edges of Alliance space 3 years ago and began attacking without provocation. No demands, no negotiations, just destruction. The Vornax's compound eyes glittered. "No negotiation with impurity." "Impurity?" Jiho leaned forward. "What do you mean?" But the Vornax fell silent again. Jiho tried different approaches, different questions, but the alien refused to speak further. Days passed. The prisoner remained defiant. Then something unexpected happened. "Lieutenant," said a guard, "there's someone here who says she can help with the prisoner. Says her name is Gipium." Jiho met the woman in the command center. She was thin, with haunted eyes and a scar across her face. She wore a simple Alliance uniform. "I was a translator on the colony ship Aurora," she explained. "The Vornax captured me 2 years ago. I was a prisoner until Alliance forces liberated the mining colony on Proxys 6 last month." "You speak their language?" asked Jiho. "Enough to understand them. More importantly, I understand how they think." Her eyes hardened. "I lived among them. I watched them. I learned to survive." Jiho brought Gipeum to the holding cell. The Vornax prisoner's reaction was immediate. Its posture changed, becoming more aggressive, mandibles clicking rapidly. "He recognizes what I am," said Gipeum. "A survivor. An escaped slave. An impurity that lived." She spoke to the Vornax in its own language, a series of clicks and chittering sounds. The alien responded angrily. "What did you say to him?" asked Jiho. "I told him his hive would reject him now that he's been captured. That he's become impure by our touch." She smiled without humor. "It's what they believe." Over the next few days, Jiho and Gipium worked together with the prisoner. Slowly, they built an understanding of Vornax culture and beliefs. The picture that emerged was troubling. "They see themselves as purifiers," explained Gipium as she and Jiho walked through the base. "Their religion teaches that certain species disrupt the cosmic balance. The Alliance, with its mixing of different life forms, is the ultimate abomination in their eyes. So this is a holy war for them," said Jiho. "They're not conquering, they're cleansing." "Yes, and they believe victory is inevitable because their cause is righteous." She stopped walking and faced him. "That's why they never retreat, never surrender. Death in battle guarantees them a place in their version of paradise." Jiho absorbed this information thoughtfully. "Understanding the enemy is half the battle. Thanks to you, we now know what drives them." "There's more," said Gipium. "The prisoner let slip something about a great hatching happening soon. I think it's some kind of massive reinforcement. A new generation of warriors." "When?" asked Jiho urgently. "I don't know exactly. Soon, within weeks." Jiho hurried to the command center to share this intelligence with Do-hyun and Admiral Kyung-soon. If a new wave of Vornax forces was coming, their window for turning the tide was closing fast. "We need to use what we've learned," said Jiho after explaining the situation. "The Vornax believe they're righteous, that their gods favor them. What happens if we make them doubt?" "Psychological warfare again," said Admiral Kyung-soon. "But how?" "Gipium says they have specific religious beliefs about how battles should be conducted. Signs they look for to confirm divine favor." Jiho's eyes gleamed. "We can use that. The plan was dangerous. Jiho would allow himself to be captured, carrying false information that would lead the Vornax into a trap. But during the planning session, an alarm blared. "Vornax forces are on the move," reported Ha-un urgently. "All fronts. This is a major offensive." On the tactical display, red markers surged toward Alliance positions. The Vornax were attacking with everything they had. "The great hatching must be closer than we thought," said Gipium. "They're trying to finish this before their reinforcements arrive." "All units to battle stations," ordered Admiral Kyung-soon. "This is the moment we've prepared for." Jiho rushed to join his troops. As he passed through the door, a massive explosion rocked the base. The lights flickered and went out, replaced by emergency lighting. Direct hit on the east defensive line, reported a technician. They've broken through. In the chaos that followed, Jiho lost track of Gipium. He focused on rallying his soldiers, directing them to reinforce the breach. The Vornax poured through the gap in their defenses, their mandibles clicking in anticipation of victory. The battle was intense, hand-to-hand in some places, as the spaces were too confined for ranged weapons. Jiho fought alongside his troops, his cybernetic arm giving him strength that matched the Vornax warriors. But there were too many. A massive explosion threw him against a wall. His vision blurred. When it cleared, he found himself surrounded by Vornax soldiers, their weapons aimed at his heart. Behind them stood war leader Drux himself, instantly recognizable from intelligence photos. The Vornax commander studied Jiho with cold compound eyes. "The human leader," said Drux in heavily accented Alliance standard. "You have caused us much trouble." "Just getting started," said Jiho through bloodied lips. "No, you are finished." Drux gestured to his soldiers. "Take him. He will witness the end of his kind before he dies." Jiho was dragged away, disarmed but alive. As he was led through the corridors of the Vornax flagship, he realized this might be the opportunity they needed. Not as planned, but perhaps even better. He was being taken directly to the heart of enemy command. In the holding cell on the Vornax ship, Jiho tested his restraints. They were tight, cutting into his wrists. His cybernetic arm had been partially disabled. Though the Vornax didn't understand human technology well enough to completely deactivate it, the door slid open, and Jiho looked up, expecting to see Drux or another Vornax commander. Instead, Gipium stood there, wearing the uniform of a Vornax slave. "You?" Jiho whispered in shock. "Quiet," she hissed, checking the corridor. "They captured me during the attack. They don't realize I understand them. I've learned something important." Quickly, she explained what she had overheard. The great hatching was not reinforcements as they had thought. It was a massive fear amplifier, far larger than the one Sunmi had destroyed. The Vornax had built it on their home moon, drawing power from their sun. When activated, it would broadcast terror across the entire system, paralyzing all Alliance forces. "We have to warn the others," said Jiho urgently. "I'll try to find a way to communicate with the Alliance," promised Gipeum. "But first we need to escape." She worked on his restraints using a stolen tool. As the cuffs fell away, alarms blared throughout the ship. "They know I'm missing," she said. D. Jiho and Gipium moved silently through the corridors of the Vornax flagship. Alarms continued to sound, but the ship was vast, and they had a small head start. "The escape pods are 2 decks down," whispered Gipium, guiding them through service tunnels she had memorized during her previous captivity. "But they'll be guarded now." Jiho nodded, his mind racing. They needed more than escape. They needed to get word back to Alliance Command about the Great Hatching, the massive fear weapon that could end the war in the Vornax's favor. "We need to find a communication station," he said. "Something I can hack to send a message." Gipium hesitated, then nodded. "There's a secondary command post on this level. Fewer guards than the main bridge." They changed direction, moving toward the command post. Jiho's cybernetic arm was still not at full strength, but the diagnostics showed improvement. He would need every advantage they could get. They reached a junction and froze as a Vornax patrol passed. Once clear, they continued, finally reaching the door to the secondary command post. 2 guards inside, usually, said Gipeum, but there might be more now with the alert. Jiho assessed their options. "I'll create a distraction. When they investigate, you slip inside and barricade the door." Before she could object, he moved back down the corridor and found what he was looking for, an access panel to the ship's fire suppression system. Using his cybernetic arm, he tore it open and ripped out key components. Alarms changed tone as the system detected a fire hazard. Foam sprayed from sealing nozzles, creating chaos. As predicted, the door to the command post opened and guards emerged to investigate. Jiho ducked into a side passage as Gipium slipped past them into the command post. Jiho fought his way through the distracted guards, his cybernetic arm giving him an edge, despite its reduced functionality. He joined Gipium inside the command post, and together they sealed the door. "How long before they break through?" he asked, moving to the communications console. "Minutes at most," she replied, taking position at the door with a weapon she'd taken from a fallen guard. Jiho worked quickly, his cybernetic interface connecting with the Vornax systems. They were alien, but technology followed universal principles. He found the transmission protocols and began composing a message. Alliance Command, this is Lieutenant Jiho. Vornax building massive fear amplifier. Location, their home moon. Activation imminent. Attack immediately. Authentication code. Earth 7729. He set the message to broadcast on all Alliance frequencies, just as pounding began on the door. Message sent, he said, turning to Gipium. Now we need to find those escape pods. She nodded to a schematic on a nearby screen. There, 2 levels down, section 12. The door began to glow red as cutting tools worked on it from the outside. Secondary exit? Asked Jiho. Maintenance shaft behind that panel. They pried open the panel and crawled into the narrow shaft just as the door gave way. Vornax soldiers poured into the room, chittering in anger when they found it empty. Jiho and Gaipium crawled through the maintenance system, descending toward the escape pod bay. The shaft narrowed at points, forcing them to squeeze through spaces barely large enough for their bodies. The Vornax, with their much larger frames, could not follow. Almost there, whispered Gipium as they reached a junction. The pod bay is through that hatch. Jiho peered through the small window in the hatch. The pod bay was guarded by 4 Vornax soldiers. Too many to fight, he said. We need another distraction. He examined the maintenance panel beside them, then smiled. Emergency decompression system. If I trigger it for adjacent sections, they'll have to respond, finished Gipium. Do it. Jiho overrode the safety protocols and activated emergency decompression in several compartments near the pod bay. Alarms blared with new urgency, and 3 of the 4 guards ran to respond. Now, said Jiho, pushing open the hatch. They dropped into the pod bay, quickly dispatching the remaining guard. Jiho ran to the nearest escape pod and began the launch sequence while Gipium kept watch. Hurry, she urged. They'll seal the bay remotely once they realize what we're doing. The pod systems came online. Jiho programmed a course for the Alliance base and opened the pod door. Let's go. As they rushed toward the pod, a massive figure stepped from behind a support column. War leader Drux blocked their path, his mandibles clicking in fury. Humans, he hissed, always running, always using tricks instead of facing death with honor. Jiho pushed Gipium toward the pod. Get inside. Launch if I don't make it. She hesitated, but a look from him sent her moving. Jiho faced the Vornax commander, his cybernetic arm now at 70% functionality according to his diagnostic display. You want honor? Said Jiho, one-on-one. Just you and me. Drux's compound eyes gleamed. Your corpse will adorn my chamber. The Vornax leader attacked with surprising speed for his size. Jiho dodged the first blow, using his smaller stature and greater agility to slip past Drux's guard. His cybernetic fist connected with the Vornax's side, but the alien's natural armor absorbed much of the impact. Drux grabbed Jiho's normal arm, nearly crushing it in his powerful grip. Jiho responded by driving his cybernetic thumb into one of Drux's compound eyes. The Vornax roared in pain, releasing him. The fight was brutal and fast. Jiho used every dirty trick he had learned in Earth's wars, targeting joints, sensitive organs, using the environment as a weapon. Drux fought with the strength and confidence of a lifetime warrior who had never known defeat. A powerful blow sent Jiho sprawling across the deck. His cybernetic arm sparked, damage warnings flashing in his vision. This is the best Earth offers, taunted Drux, advancing slowly. Pathetic, Jiho glanced at the escape pod. Gipium watched from inside, her face a mask of fear. He needed to give her time to launch. Why do you hate us so much? Asked Jiho, stalling as he struggled to his feet. What did the Alliance ever do to the Vornax? Your existence is an offense to cosmic order, said Drux. Your species mingle, cooperate, share worlds. The universe demands purity. Sounds lonely, said Jiho. He noticed a pressure release valve behind Drux, one that controlled the atmospherics for this section of the ship. You cannot understand. Your species is too primitive, too chaotic. Drux raised his weapon for a killing blow. Jiho's cybernetic arm shot out, not toward Drux, but toward the valve. He twisted it with all his remaining strength, and the atmosphere in the bay began to vent explosively. Both Jiho and Drux were thrown off their feet. Jiho had been expecting it and managed to grab a support strut. Drux tumbled toward the opening, his larger mass working against him. The Vornax commander scrabbled for purchase, chittering in panic. Using the chaos, Jiho pulled himself along the struts toward the escape pod. The bay was depressurizing rapidly. Emergency force fields would activate soon, but he had seconds at most. He reached the pod just as Drux managed to stabilize himself. Their eyes met across the bay, human and alien, two warriors with nothing but contempt for each other. Jiho sealed the pod door as Drux launched himself forward. The Vornax's claws scraped against the viewport as the pod ejected from the ship, leaving Drux behind in the depressurizing bay. "You did it," said Gipium. Her voice filled with awe. "We both did," replied Jiho, collapsing into a seat as the pod accelerated away from the flagship. "And we're not done yet." On K-12, the Alliance Command Center was in chaos. Fornax forces had broken through multiple defensive lines. The situation seemed hopeless until Jiho's message arrived. "A superweapon," said Do-hyun, studying the tactical data. "That explains their sudden offensive. They're trying to keep us busy while they activate it." Admiral Kyung-soon nodded grimly. "If they succeed, this war is over. Our forces will be paralyzed with fear. Then we strike first," said Do-hyun. He turned to the communications officer. "Order all available ships to regroup. We're launching everything we have at the Vornax home moon." "Sir, that's where their heaviest defenses are concentrated," objected General Zax. "It would be suicide." "Not if we use Jiho's tactics one more time," said Do-hyun. He outlined a daring plan. "A false flag operation using captured Vornax codes. We transmit falsified religious omens," he explained. "According to what Gipium told us about their beliefs, certain signs indicate divine disfavor. If they think their gods have turned against them, psychological warfare on a grand scale," said Admiral Kyung-soon with approval. "While they're confused, we strike." The plan went into motion immediately. Ha-yun, using her expertise in communications, crafted the false religious transmissions. They were sent on Vornax frequencies appearing to come from their own priesthood. The response was immediate. Confusion spread through the Vornax fleet. Some ships broke formation, others held position but stopped firing. Their coordinated attack faltered. "It's working," reported Ha-un. "Their communications are in chaos. Some are calling for a retreat to consult with their religious leaders." "Now," ordered Do-hyun, "launch the attack." Alliance forces reorganized into 3 battle groups struck simultaneously. The first group, led by Admiral Kyung-soon, engaged the Vornax fleet directly, using naval warfare tactics from Earth's oceanic battles. The second group, a mixture of Alliance and human ships, targeted the Vornax ground forces on K-12. Without coordination from their fleet, the Vornax troops were isolated and vulnerable.